Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be talking about astrology and the death of Sandra Birchmore. I'm going to give a little synopsis of what happened and how she was ruled dead, and what the actual death may have been, and so forth and so on. And then I'm going to talk about some natal placements and transits to a chart that might have been tied in with her untimely death. Now, Sandra Birchmore was found dead in her, I guess it was apartment on February 4th, 2021. It was ruled a suicide, I believe, by strangulation. And the thing is, though, there's certain things that contradict, especially video footage which shows somebody by the name of Matthew Farrell walking in to her, I guess, her complex like 4 days before she was found dead. Before she was found dead. And the thing is, there was an inappropriate connection with this person. That Matthew Farrell was, I don't know, I don't think he's still with the police, but he had been a police officer, and my understanding is he had initiated or started some inappropriate, sexual relationship with Sandra Birchmore when she was a minor, and it obviously constitutes a crime. And in the relationship, apparently, it kept on for some time. And my understanding that he was the father of the child that Sandra Birchmore was going to have. And my understanding too, there may have been an acrimonious dispute, prior to her death that he had with her. Now, he is seen, walking, into according to the report, that he had been walking into the apartment complex and 4 days prior to her death, and was the last person to actually see her alive. And again, it was ruled, a suicide, which I think is preposterous, based on what we're, seeing some findings now on this case. It looks to me like it was ostensibly murder. Matthew Farrell, I believe, is likely the person that committed it, and it just raises a lot of questions in terms of, why are the police really doing more? Why hasn't this person been investigated? Are they are the police in on this? Are they covering something up? Are they trying to suppress information? What is actually, going on? And I want to state, and by any chance that any, close friends or family members of Sandra Birchmore actually see this video, I want to offer my condolences and prayers to those people, to the close friends and family members of her um, at this time. Now, the birth data, I mean, it's only from one source, and I'm not stating 100% that this is accurate, but I'm going with the source, and I don't know if I'm saying the website right, scribd.com. It is, it got her birth date on it, and apparently it's from some investigation that somebody had run, and, that her birth date is May 13th, 1997. Of course, I don't have a time of birth for her, so I had to improvise once again and do a solar slash sunrise time, in which I put the sun at the same spot as the ascendant. Now, again, her birth date is May 13th, 1997. It puts, of course, the sun in Taurus. And based on the sunrise time, it's at 22 degrees. That's a critical degree in astrology. It's seen as a dreaded degree, and it's a critical degree by itself. When I say by itself, 22 degrees Taurus, 22 degrees in the fixed signs are critical degrees. 22 degrees is perceived as a negative or adverse degree for all signs, but more especially with the fixed signs, because that is considered a critical degree. 22 degrees of the fixed signs, and that's including Taurus, of course. And the sun, it is about our life. It's called the 22nd degrees to kill or be killed degree. I actually have 22 degrees Taurus rising, ironically enough, and maybe that's had something to do with me being drawn, to this, to this person, and her death, sadly. And the thing is, having a Taurus sun, I'm sure she lived her, her life, in a way that is very peaceful, tranquil, basic, the sun is the basic fundamental character. And having the sun in Taurus, she likely sun was very stolid and passive, somebody that was peaceful, stable, calm, persistent, reliable, trustworthy. But unfortunately, she didn't have the trust in these, I mean, she had maybe put too much trust in the wrong people. Unfortunately, this is a story of betrayal and abuse by the police. And her moon is in Leo, and that's obviously a far contrast and disparity to her sun. Which the sun, of course, is the conscious part. Her moon is the unconscious side. It's more of that hidden personality demeanor. The moon being in Leo, she may have been somebody that, I mean, not may, well, she was somebody likely may want to give the impression of grandeur, and a person that was very, as far as the inner self, more extroverted, gregarious, flamboyant. Um, Sun and Taurus is more, as far as the basic character, more connected, enamored with domestic interests. The moon and having the moon in Leo, there was that side of her that wanted to shine more and wanted more attention, notoriety and recognition. So the thing about this is, during this looking at her chart, and depending on time of birth, she may have had the sun square the moon. If the sun was square the moon, that could show stormy and turbulent connections with others. And it's also having a conflict between her basic character and her the unconscious side, which is the moon. Now, another thing I noticed that stood out in her chart is that she has Neptune, based on the solar sunrise time that solar sunrise chart. Neptune is very close to the midheaven. She has Neptune at 29 degrees. Neptune is about deception, betrayal. 29 degrees is a crisis anaretic degree in astrology. She has it in Capricorn, the sign connected with authority and older people. And this thing that was ruled a suicide, I mean, Neptune is by the midheaven, so sadly there was that could indicate strong notoriety and recognition in connection with it. But I think what's interesting is that Neptune is retrograde, so this is something that might be the indicators to why this is ruled a suicide, but really isn't. So it's in reverse. Neptune is going in, it's retrograde again at that 29th degree, a crisis degree. And Neptune, is about deception, illusion, betrayal, and you have it at the 29th crisis degree in the sign of Capricorn. Again, older people, authority figures. This was a betrayal, it seems like, from a police officer in this particular case. Another thing that stands out in her chart, she has Pluto opposite Venus, which, Venus is in Gemini, and it shows, lovers that can be mercurial, superficial, ones that are mischievous, that, may prevaricate. And you have it in opposition to Pluto. Venus opposite Pluto by itself can indicate, relationships with others that can be manipulative, that maybe the person is often being manipulated by a lover. It could go the other way too, but I think it was more about these people, these officers being, more manipulating her than the other way around. Pluto is also connected with coercion and bullying. I don't know if there was any of that going on, but what happened may have constituted sexual abuse. And I would say Pluto does have a connection with that, and she has Pluto again opposite Venus, and Venus is connected with relationships in astrology. And the thing about something else that I noticed too and stands out, okay, she has Sagittarius on the cusp of, well, first I want to get to the fourth house cusp, the end of life. She has based on the solar sunrise time, she has Leo on the cusp of the fourth house and the fifth house. I mean, the Leo on the cusp of the fourth house by itself can indicate, a dramatic ending, end of life in some instances. And then she has Leo on the cusp of the fifth house. What makes this intriguing and interesting is the fact that the fourth house again is connected with the end of life. The fifth house is connected with children and pregnancy. And when she died her end of life, she had been pregnant with a child. Leo is the sign of children. And the thing about this is interesting. I mean, I'm looking at her chart, her house setup based on the solar sunrise time. Ironically, is very close to mine. Going up on a little on a Gemini tangent here. Anyway, hold on a moment, people. And the thing that I'm, looking at too in her chart, based on the solar sunrise time. Another thing is that she has Sagittarius on the 8th house cusp, and 8th house cusp is death. And the thing about that is Sagittarius on the 8th house cusp can indicate, something at the time of death, where there was something foolhardy or reckless. Sagittarius is also connected with the law, so it's an indicator that somebody, if a person is murdered, it could be somebody from the law that committed the murder. The ruler of the 8th house, Jupiter, falls in the 10th house, so it's not surprising that the death was one that gained some attention, notoriety, and recognition. Also, too, looking at this as well, going back to Pluto being in the 7th house, it shows that, Pluto in Sagittarius, and that's the sign, Sagittarius is connected with the law. Pluto rules death. 7th house is has a connection too, I'd say, with law enforcement. It rules, legal matters, legalities. It can show that open enemies can be ones that are very destructive. And she has Pluto on the cusp of the 7th house. Now, I'm not really considering this person an open enemy. It was more like a hidden one to me. And she has Saturn in the solar sunrise chart. Saturn is in the 12th house, and Saturn is in Aries. Saturn is about authority, older people, authority figures, and it is in the 12th house of hidden adversaries. Interestingly enough, Aries can have a connection with law enforcement. And the thing about this is there's some transits I wanted to get into. I believe that's what I'm going to be closing with. Some things that may have stood out is that when you look at this, one thing she had transit Mercury, I believe, is in loose square to her natal sun. And the transit Mercury square the sun by itself can indicate, could be a dispute with somebody in authority, a supervisor, somebody that's up in higher ranking somewhere. And the sun being in Taurus, that person, that superior, so to speak, could have been somebody who was very willful, obstinate, unyielding. The thing is unwavering, immutable. And, because, it's interesting that the death is connected with it's like strangulation. It's ruled as suicide. I wanted to say, I'm going to go back for a minute on this, on the suicide ruling. I want to say, elaborate and expound why I think that could be preposterous. Is that my understanding is that it was ruled a suicide, her death, but in order for her to have done this, it was ruled a suicide based on her taking some kind of, I don't know, some kind of cloth material, tying it around her neck and connecting it to a doorknob, which I believe that's what was stated. And it seems like that would be a very unorthodox way to, if you're going to, kill yourself, you're going to do it, if you're going to hang, if you're going to do, death by strangulation, it's going to be more in a hanging, upright position, not where you're on, sitting on the floor and tying yourself to, tying something around your neck and connecting it to the doorknob. It'd be pretty hard, for somebody to actually do that anyway. Why are you going to make something more complicated, more complex and harder for you to actually do than it's necessary? So to me, it just doesn't seem like it fits the suicide theory. But anyway, transit Mercury at the time was in Aquarius. I'm going with the time of death. What I believe is the date of death would be January 31st, 2021, because she was found dead on February 4th, and there was a report that states that the police officer had been seen going in on 4 days prior to when she was found dead. So that would make that date January 31st, 2021. And transit Mercury is in Aquarius, and Mercury is connected with breathing. Again, it was making a loose square to her natal sun at the time. And to me, that could be indicators to something physically negative happening to you physically connected with breathing. And in Aquarius is unusual, so you could pretty much do the math on that one. And I'm just trying to just look here for a minute. Bear with me, people. Looks like transit Sun was very close to her natal Uranus at the time. I gotta make sure I'm getting this right. Transit Sun was at 11 degrees. Natal Uranus was it was about 8 degrees. It's not really not a conjunction, but it's still very close. And when you have a transit like that, Uranus, whether it's transit Uranus hitting one's sun or transit your sun by one's Uranus, that could indicate something unusual, unexpected happening pertaining to one's life. And the sun is also connected with children as well. And it's really, it's a terrible thing what transpired. Another thing I noticed, there was at least a loose opposition made by transit Neptune to her natal Mars. And what that could indicate is, when you have, a transit, Neptune makes an adverse aspect to your natal Mars, that in some cases can deplete or weaken the energy, and it might have made it more difficult for her to fight back, and assuming that she was strangled by another person. And the thing is, you have a thing about it is her having the sun in Taurus. I'm sure she fought as hard as she possibly could. But if you figure if this was a police officer that did it, that was trained and knows how to fight, knows how to subdue, people, criminals. But in this case, of course, she wasn't a criminal, but they know how, they understand technique in doing things to actually to cause the harm, and the thing is, this is a person, somebody obviously a lot bigger than she was, and if he got her from behind, if this actually did go down this way and this person did strangle her, you got to understand, getting someone from behind in that position, and a young, a girl that probably wasn't very big in stature. I don't know her size, but I think she obviously was nowhere near his stature, and this was a person that, if this went down this way, which I believe it likely did, that simply overpowered her at this and was able, and there wasn't really a lot she was likely able to do in order to defend herself. And I wanted to add one other thing. This isn't really being, flippant about, as far as, Sandra goes, but I wanted to say, I was watching a video, on this about her death the other day, and somebody, it said something about, well, this makes zero sense, this whole thing. Well, as far as I guess what he was referring to was the suicide theory. Now, oddly enough, she's got Mercury, which has to do with the rational mind. She had in Taurus the sign of money at 0 degrees, based on the the solar sunrise chart I did. And anyway, people, that's pretty much what I wanted to get. And I guess only one more thing I add. I know I said this before and I kept talking, but I wanted to say, that as far as, justice, for her goes, one interesting basic transit that's coming up in the, in the near future, and it's not far from her sun right now, is transit Uranus and Taurus. And, oddly and ironically enough, she had the transit sun in close proximity to her natal Uranus when she passed away. Now, I'm thinking when transit Uranus actually, makes the when it makes the conjunction to her sun, even though she's passed on, that could indicate something unusual, unexpected, or spontaneous connected with her, with this person. And maybe this is where, something happens which is positive. Because remember, conjunctions can be positive and negative. They're neutral aspects, and being hopeful that this could be a time where, maybe something positive will happen, in for Sandra. And and again, I got this just from the one source, and I'm hoping that this is the correct, birth data, May 13th, 1997, for Sandra, saying the name right, Sandra Birchmore. So, and again, my prayers and condolences do go out to, again, the close friends and family members of Sandra. And I do believe this was ostensibly murder, that this was no way that this was a suicide. I say, justice for Sandra. I hope she gets it, sooner than later, and with enough people out there that will be, supporting, what really might be really happen, as opposed to the suicide theory. Maybe it'll propel, justice to be served quicker as opposed to later. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, Edwin Learnard saying, stay well.